Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Let's get back to Iraq, because this man right here is about to make a power move. You see, this man truly is there for the Iraqi people. I really believe that, because the more I see and read about what Sadr is doing, the more I'm convinced that he truly is a man for the people. I'm not thrilled with some of his decision making as far as how to deal with Israel, and that is because I really would like to see peace in the Middle East. But there's a couple of tactics that Sadr is using. One that kind of made me chuckle a little bit, because it's his way of sticking up the middle finger to the status quo, as well as to those who are supported by Iran. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. But he is at his wit's end, and he is not immune from turning to violence. Before we get started, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. If you're thinking about buying gold or silver, check out our friends over there at Money Metals Exchange. The link is down below in the description. If you are a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code Pimpy, P-I-M-P-Y, and you will get a free half ounce of silver. To my subscribers over there on Pimpy's News Network, this could be you. Or even better, this could be you. All 15 squares full, which led to a 64,000 jackpot that I got. That's right. If you're a subscriber on Pimpy's News Network and you pay $5 or more per month, this could be you. Once a month, we will select one name out of the network that pays $5 or more on their subscription, and you will automatically be entered into a drawing. If your name is selected, we will reach out to you via email to let you know you have been selected. We will let you know what day we will go live on air from the casino. Put in $100 on your behalf. And from there, everybody could watch live to see if you walk away with hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, and possibly even tens of thousands of dollars. We will all see live on air what the outcome is. That's going to be the fun part of this whole thing. So come on over, join Pimpy's News Network. $5 a month is all you have to pay to be eligible for the drawing. And again, if you're selected, we will do this live on air. You will see what the winner gets. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come on over there and join us. I look forward to it. Yeah, so I think I'm going to do just a live poll before we pull any names, just to show you what it's like. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think you guys will be interested in it. Okay, so I love this picture. We used it before. That's a cheesy smile from Al-Qademi. I said there was a reason for him to be smiling, because this is the prime minister that Sadr wants, and actually has. You see what I'm talking about. It says Sadr bets on keeping the prime minister Al-Qademi and using political limbo to edge out rivals. Unable to form a new government, the cleric has decided there are other ways to sideline the Iranian-backed groups, starting with appointing officials. Says it's been 7 months now since Iraq went to the polls in October parliamentary elections, and fierce rivalry between the two camps, one led by influential Shiite cleric Sadr and the others backed by Iran, has stopped anyone from forming a government. So a week ago, Sadr called on 40 or so independents elected to parliament to form their own bloc and nominate a prime minister that his alliance, made up of Sadr's MPs, Sunni parties, and Kurdistan Democratic Party, would support. Yet Iraqi political leaders involved in government formation talks told Middle East Eye that Sadr has little expectations they will do so, and instead is looking to keep current Prime Minister Al-Qademi in place for 6 months to a year. Yeah, this is a funny tactic, watch. Sadr is not in a hurry to form a government. Keeping the current situation as it is for 6 months to a year is one of the solutions now being strongly proposed. A prominent leader of the Sadr Save the Homeland Alliance, who is close to the KDP leader Barzani, told MEE, said there is no circumstance or factor, local or international, pressing any of the players in the tripartite alliance to expedite the formation of the government. If we talk about the United States, it's too busy elsewhere in the world and has not much concern with what is currently happening in Iraq. As for Iran, the continuation of the situation is less harmful than the outbreak of Shia fighting. So getting the parliament moving. Sadr already holds great sway over Al-Kadhimi's government, and in October, his Saran Alliance party emerged the clear victor. Since then, he has tried to form a majority government alongside his Kurdish and Sunni allies that would sideline Iranian-backed Shia factions, who together are known as a coordinating framework. Unhappy about being frozen out of the next government, those factions have boycotted parliament and ensured a quorum cannot be reached to continue the government formation process. But permanent status would also be damaging. This is awesome. If Sadr is able to continue monopolizing control through his control of parliament and Al-Kadhimi's government, the Iranian-backed groups will find their influence and power waning. To prove his plan's seriousness, Sadr has not waited for his 2-week deadline to independence to expire before making his next moves. He and his allies have declared parliamentary work will continue regardless of whether the boycotters attend or not. Through 2/3 of the MPs are needed to sit to elect a president and nominate a prime minister, just half, 166 MPs, can pass most legislation. Sadr and his alliance have 186 seats. It said the parliament leadership, the speaker and his 2 deputies, is made up of Halabasi, head of the Sunni bloc, a Sadrist and member of the KDP, and they have promised to get parliament moving. Al-Zamili, the Sadr's deputy speaker, on Monday informed the heads of the parliamentary blocs that appointments to parliament committees have been decided and work to appoint them will begin immediately. 3 MPs told MEE. As for legislation, first on the list that needs to be passed is the annual budget, but the current disputes, the lack of sessions in Parliament, and the delay in the formation of parliamentary committees have prevented its approval so far. With no budget, government projects, offices, and social welfare networks would soon run out of cash. To avoid this, Sadr and his alliance last month a mini-budget draft called the Food Security and Development Law for urgent vote. The law would see monthly amounts of up to 35 trillion Iraqi dinars from the surplus monthly of oils, international grants and donations and loans secured and deposited in the bank accounts controlled by the finance minister. Essentially, it would keep the country going for several months without approving the annual budget. Voting on the food security law was scheduled to take place last week. We will not allow the country to be held hostage. We will implement the Constitution, and the continuation says that there is a legally recognized parliament, a parliament speaker, a president, a prime minister, and a government, a prominent Sadrist leader told MEE. Particularly, there will be no problem if the new government is not formed for another few months. We have a parliament and a government which will both carry out their duties without any trouble. Yeah, see, the coordinating framework, they might be able to block politicians from being appointed. But if it only takes half of the MPs in Parliament to pass certain legislation, then their government's just going to go as is, keeping Saleh and Kadhimi in their positions. Sidelining Iran's allies. Sadr is really slick when it comes to these types of things. It says, before Sadr's election victory and his calls for a majority government, Iraq was governed by consensus. Since 2003, political forces have operated under a power-sharing agreement, where influential offices and positions, both civilian and military, are divided up between parties along the lines of representation in parliament. Some are given on the basis of courtesy and favoritism. Some are given as a reward. Only parliament can approve appointments to these positions. But devoid of political consensus and amid fierce competition between the parliamentary blocs, over recent years, Kadhimi and his predecessors have had to fill positions by appointing temporary acting officials, circumventing the parliament process. So for nearly 2 decades, Iranian-backed forces have dominated the Iraq government and parliament, and they hold almost 2/3 of the senior positions. This percentage will change completely, and appointments without parliamentary approval will end soon. A prominent Sadrist MP told MEE that Sadr's alliance has the power to continue or dissolve parliament, and the situation as it stands does not hinder his projects. On the contrary, it greatly harms its opponents, he said. The Sadr said moves will be made to appoint new officials as soon as the deadline given to the independence expires. There is a new philosophy for the administration, and the philosophy needs new men. Accordingly, we will work to replace the old team with a new one. We will end running the country by proxy. This is what everyone wants, and this is what we will do. So Parliament is doing the people's will. That's what it seems like so far. But this is funny. You see what he's doing. Fine, if they don't want to go into Parliament and vote on the president and the prime minister, no problem. We'll just keep the ones that are there, which is the ones they want in there anyways. So they continue with Al-Kadhimi as the prime minister, and Saleh will be the president. Then they'll just take the rest of the members that are over in Parliament, and even if the coordinating framework did not want to participate, it would not matter. Although the coordinating framework is able to block political appointees, they cannot block legislation. It only takes half of the MPs, and Sadr owns 186 of those seats. So he's just going to go ahead and continue with this government. Meanwhile, ignoring any influence or input from the coordinating framework or any of the other Iranian-backed politicians. So will Sadr's tactic work? Maybe. Maybe not. You see, the coordinating framework has a little ace in the hole. That is, the leader of the Supreme Court is an ally of the coordinating framework. And the coordinating framework keeps bringing all kinds of cases to the Supreme Court to stop Sadr dead in his tracks. Here's what I'm talking about. It says Iraq's political stalemate raises chances of Shia on Shia clashes. Repeatedly thwarted, Sadr has begun implying the use of force and provoking his Iranian-backed rivals. Yikes. Doesn't have no problems with taking up arms and fighting. After months of frustration and impasse, relations between Sadr and his Iranian-backed Shia rivals have deteriorated so badly that Iraq Shia leaders are predicting armed clashes could even be on the cards. Sadr, an influential Shia cleric with a fiercely loyal following, emerged from Iraq's October parliamentary elections as the clear winner, but his victory was quickly followed by a series of defeats that have stopped him and his allies from forming a government. Shia factions close to Iran were set to be frozen out of the government, with Sadr allying with the Sunni bloc and Kurdish KDP, but a federal Supreme Court ruling over the quorum needed for the government formation process has meant Sadr has been unable to swear in his choice of president and prime minister due to his rival boycott in parliament. The clerk then settled on sticking with the current government led by Al-Kadhimi, only for the federal courts to again rule against him, saying that Al-Kadhimi's cabinet was just operating in a caretaking role and could not make the important decisions necessary to keep Iraq going, which at first didn't make any sense to me at all until I realized that the Supreme Court are actually allies of the coordinating framework. It says that decision unleashed an anger in Sadr not seen by his rivals since government formation negotiations began. It prompted him to publicly denounce the judiciary, accusing it of going along with the disgraceful actions of the blocking third of MPs boycotting parliament. In a broadcast last week, Sadr claimed that the blocking third have obstructed government formation because they do not exist without authority. He promised not to abandon his project, which would see 2 decades of rolled-by consensus ripped up for majority government, excluding the Iranian-backed parties. Sadr warned his opponents of his anger and impatience. "Do you think your actions will force us to ally with you?" he asked. "No, thousands know. We will not return Iraq to quotas, corruptions, and adherent consensus." Angering Iran's allies. The 3-minute-long speech frightened many Iraqis and provoked Sadr's opponents, particularly the leader of the armed Shia factions. What followed made it worse. Any ambiguity about Sadr's intentions was soon dispelled by the head of Sadr's armed wing, who tweeted afterwards, "We are ready, so wait for us." Hundreds of al-Salam fighters then paraded in Sadr city and impoverished East Baghdad's neighborhood that is the Sadrist stronghold, declaring their readiness to carry out the orders of their leader. Meanwhile, media platforms affiliated with Sadr began publishing names of leaders of Al-Haq and Hezbollah, the fiercest and most influential Shiite armed factions. Their names were accompanied by their addresses, headquarters, and photos, as well as threatening and intimidating expressions. Yikes. Oh man, I don't know, man, whether to be afraid of Sadr or just really admire him from a distance because his tactics are really good. In response, the leaders of the Shiite forces, including the armed factions, monitored the developments and readied all their fighters, ordering them to exercise maximum restraint. Shiite leaders familiar with the development told MEE. Hours later, on the 16th of May, the leaders of the Coordinating Framework Shia Alliance met in the home of former Prime Minister Abadi in Baghdad to decide how they would respond to Sadr's threats. The meeting, which lasted until early hours of the next morning, resulted in a written statement criticizing Sadr for questioning and challenging the decisions of the federal court, which it described as a dangerous development that establishes chaos and instability. It called on Sadr and his alliance to abandon their plans for a majority government and give priority to the nation's interests, abandon the policies of acquisitions and monopolizing power, and deal positively with initiatives. What the statement didn't convey, however, was that the Coordinating Framework's leaders were very provoked by the Sadr's moves and changed the wording several times to soften and dial down the anger and language. Two people at the meeting told MEE. Everyone was angry and provoked, especially the leaders of the armed factions. Sadr went too far this time. According to the source, former Prime Minister Maliki, the most prominent political leader in the coordination framework, refused to be drawn into exchanging threats with Sadr and pressed a lot to change their content of the statement and its wording several times. We don't want to precipitate the collision that was imminent. So it goes down here to say there are three options. Aware of their success they achieved in undermining Sadr's parliamentary supremacy, but also the dilemma that Sadr is currently facing, the leaders of the Iranian-backed armed factions decided in the meeting to adopt a new strategy. According to the leader of the Shiite armed factions, who is also a member of the coordinating framework, the strategy of containing Sadr has to end because it pushed him too far. He thinks that we are afraid of confronting him. We were very patient with him, but he translated our patience into fear or weakness. This stage is over, and he will see another face in the coming days. So it looks like it's about to get ugly over there. It looks like I'm anticipating a civil war, to be honest with you. The Baghdad meeting also agreed that three options will be put to Sadr. The first option is an alliance with the coordinating framework to form a power-sharing consensus government that will last for 1 year only. If it fails, the majority government that Sadr wants to be formed. The second option is to dissolve parliament and call for new elections. The third would be to keep the situation as it is, but any attempts by Sadr or his alliance to make any government or legislative changes that could alter the current balance of power would be met with all available means. Our biggest fear all the time was that Shia fight would break out, so we're turning a blind eye to his threats and the violations of his people. They're not afraid of any kind of confrontation. If he speaks in the language of threat, we will speak in the same language. And if he goes further than this and chooses armed confrontation, we do not mind. So there you have it. This is what we don't want. Hopefully the situation will be panned out. Sadr gets what he wants. Or if they go to civil war, that it happens quickly and isn't drawn out for years. So as far as the Iraqi Dinar exchange is concerned, any change of it whatsoever, not if there's any type of armed conflict, that's for sure. Sorry to pass that news along, but that's just the cold, hard truth. Until this government is formed, everything is stabilized, it's going to be a while before the exchange rate is changed. So anybody telling you that they got insider intel from over there, that the Iraqi Dinar exchange rate's about to change anytime, like this week or next, they're lying to you. Anyways, that's it for now. Hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. I'm out.